And we are live here on the Sports Talk Nation here on YouTube. I'm your host, Michael Cohen. We got a very good show for you today. We're going to talk about the New York Giants and their meltdown last week against the Detroit Lions with my good friend Rick Laughland. He covers the Giants on the Giant Beat. He also has a website, fanfavorites.com, that he writes for and does radio shows for them as well through Blog Talk Radio. We're going to have him on in just a matter of moments. We'll also do our Week 3 picks, as we will pick 7 games that stand out here for Week 3 in the 2017 season. Before we welcome Rick in, I just got to say this. That performance by the Giants last week was absolutely atrocious. That offensive line has got to be one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. And the sad part is, this team had a chance to address those issues with the offensive line, with the lack of a running game in the offseason, and didn't do it. I talked about it in the preseason primer on the Giants with Karen Van Cat. That was my biggest concern for this team coming into the season. And now it's starting to really become a big-time issue for this team. They can't keep Eli Manning up straight in the pocket. He's under siege when he's dropping back to pass. Now he's got his head coach throwing him under the bus, and his head coach, by the way, Ben McAdoo, really needs to take a course in how to be a head coach, because you cannot throw your quarterback under the bus and not say anything bad about Ereck Flowers, his left tackle, who has been a total nightmare at left tackle for this Giants football team. And you know what, folks? At 0-2, it could start to unravel really quick here for the Giants. I'm looking through that schedule. You have this tough game here against Philadelphia this week. They have Tampa Bay next week. They have Denver and Seattle coming up in the schedule. Very quickly, the Giants could see the season start to spiral out of control. And if it does, what looked like a team that could be 10-6, maybe 11-5, would be a playoff team, could all of a sudden look like a 6-10, 5-11 football team that is talking about the draft of next year, along with the New York Jets, who are trying to get the number 1 pick. That's how bad things are here for Big Blue. All right, and I see our guest is on the phone lines right now, and that is Rick Laughland. He writes for the Giants Beat. He also has his website, fanfavorites.com, does a show on the Jets with Dan Feuerstein through fanfavorites.com, and Rick now joins us here. Rick, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. And everybody can follow my Giants coverage at the Giants Beat. That's thegiantsbeat.com.
Mm-hmm. Rick, tell us, before we go into the Giants, tell us a little more about fanfavorites.com and also the Giants Beat and how people can find those sites.
So, yeah, as you mentioned, Dan Feuerstein and I, my partner and a colleague and friend of yours as well, we run a weekly Jets program. We've run that since 2010. It's available on iTunes. You just go to the Jets podcast on fanfavorite.com. Fans Favorite, we do basically, it's the collision of sports, gaming, and humor. So there's a little something for everybody on that site. As far as Giant fans are concerned, if you're a diehard Giant fan and you're basically almost as miserable as a Jet fan right now at 0-2, you want to follow the Giants coverage on the Scout Network, which is now part of CBS, you go to thegiantsbeat.com. It's going to have all your daily updates on everything Big Blue.
Absolutely, and both of those sites are phenomenal. And Rick does a great job, of course, spearheading a lot of that coverage for both the Giants and the Jets. But you brought up the two teams that are combined 0-4 and are both on a pace to be a combined 0-32. This keeps up. But man, the Giants at 0-2. I know the fans had a lot of high expectations coming into this season. A lot of people thought this was a team that could be a Super Bowl team, at the very least win the division, get into the playoffs. At 0-2, well, it's not impossible for them to get into the playoffs. It looks pretty bad because the offensive line is just putrid. Of course, we all starts with Ereck Flowers there at left tackle and all the problems he has trying to block people, especially guys named Ziggy Ansah. And then you have the running game, which has been absent. It's been a problem for them for a while now. In the absence of any kind of presence at wide receiver, or at least impact by any wide receiver right now, with Brandon Marshall not playing very well, not having much impact on the offense. Odell Beckham Jr. coming back from the injury. A lot of concerns for this team, and kind of like the Jets. A lot of people said it was all about the defense for the Jets, that they would be the unit that would keep the team in games, and that unit would eventually get tired out in the games, and that's how the Jets would lose games. We saw that happen here with the Giants, where that defense, I thought, was just gassed going up against the Lions in that football game.
Yeah, and that's been the story so far. I mean, not only is this Giants offense only put up 13 points through 2 games, they can't even sustain drives. I mean, you're talking about a running game that, since I've been covering the team, going back to the 2013 season, they have been unable to find a franchise-type running back or run the ball, even with a decent amount of consistency. I mean, you look at this team and this offensive line, you know, they make all sorts of upgrades. They bring in a guy from formerly with the San Diego Chargers, a big guard that can help them. He's not even playing on this team. And it's a Giants offensive line that, you know, it's one thing not to be able to get the ground game going. We saw that with the Jets in Week 1 against Buffalo, and they finally, in Week 2 against the Raiders, got some semblance of a running game. But this Giants offense is one-dimensional. It's predictable. It was without Odell Beckham Jr. in Week 1, which you saw the results, only 3 points on the board, against a Cowboys defense that was somewhat rebuilt. The back end of that secondary had a lot of new names in it. You figure that Eli Manning, and even though he's shorthanded, would have a field day. And sure enough, you know, they struggled to move the ball and put points on the board. So for me, you know, the biggest issue affecting this team is clearly everybody's pointing the finger at the offensive line, the left tackle position is Ereck Flowers, and I don't see it getting any better anytime soon. I mean, the Giants, you know, head coach Ben McAdoo has said that he will leave no stone unturned. He's going to evaluate everything from offensive line combinations to relinquishing the play calling duties, and I think that's a major part of it. I think Ben McAdoo, he's a prideful guy. He came in as offensive coordinator of this team as a 38-year-old coach, and now, you know, in his second year as head coach, I think there's a little bit of ego involved in that, you know, he's a little bit reluctant to relinquish play calling because he came up, you know, under Mike McCarthy and, you know, the Green Bay Packers, a coach that likes to make all the play calls. So that's going to be an adjustment for him, but I think that's one that he needs to try to make to shake things up because the way this Giants season is going, it's not much better than what we've seen from the Jets, and frankly, a loss in Philly to go to 0-3, and that's going to put this team in peril for playoff contention.
I agree with you, and I think the biggest thing for me with the Giants, and a lot of people have compared this to what we saw in 2007. That team, of course, started 0-2 and then turned their season around the following week in Washington when they won that game late. That team had some tenacity, and at least that team played somewhat well in the first 2 weeks. I remember that Dallas game back then was a very competitive game. The Green Bay game was a blowout loss back then. But that team at least had a fighting chance. There was a sense that this team was very united in the locker room. I don't get that sense with this team, and I've been saying this for a while, that this is a team that has the potential to implode. And we're starting to see that a little bit already with the head coach going after Eli Manning, throwing Eli under the bus. A lot of people outside the organization have ripped them. There's been a lot of rumors and rumblings going on that, you know, maybe there's some friction going on in the locker room with the players and the head coach. I mean, when I thought about friction for this team going into the season, I was thinking more along the lines of Odell and Brandon Marshall, and you know how those personalities can get in the way of one another. This is a whole different dynamic right now for the Giants.
Yeah, you look at those 2007 and even the 2011 Super Bowl teams, and the leaders on that squad were in the trenches. They were offensive linemen, whether you talk about a David Deal, a Christie, a Sean O'Hara. These guys, more so than even Eli Manning, more so than any of the guys at the skill position, even a Plexico Burress and Amani Toomer or Victor Cruz, those were really the face of the franchise and the guys that were leading that charge, both on the offensive line as well as defensive line. You can talk about an OCU Manura, a Michael Strahan, a Justin Tuck. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So the Giants did a nice job this past offseason, before, I should say, Ben McAdoo's first season as head coach, and rebuilding that defense, spending $200 million, Olivia Vernon, re-signing Jason Pierre-Paul. You bring in Janoris Jenkins. You have Landon Collins evolve into a Pro Bowl player on the defensive side of the ball. So this, to me, is a Giants team that has a complete defense, but they're not playing complementary football. And we've seen that with the Jets. How many times, with offensive utility, they're leaving their defense out to dry, and, they're losing the time of possession battle. So this, to me, you have a coach in Ben McAdoo. Look, a lot of people are upset with, specifically in the media, how he treats a lot of these press conferences. He's very surly. He doesn't want to answer a lot of questions, especially about Odell Beckham Jr.'s health. And, a lot of people complain about that. And I saw a lot of the same qualities in Tom Coughlin. The difference is Tom Coughlin won 2 Super Bowls in New York with the Giants and has a track record to prove it. The only thing, in my mind, that Ben McAdoo has done is he inherited a terrific team that went from a worse defense to a free agent spending spree in his first year, got the defense back on track. The team went 11-5 with really the offense riding on the coattails of that defense. And he was supposed to be an offensive guru that was going to turn around Eli Manning, and it's just kind of odd because when he was offensive coordinator, he said to reporters he wanted Eli Manning to complete 70% of his passes, and people scoffed at that and thought he was pretty crazy for even saying that. And Eli Manning had one of the best seasons of his career, and that was back in 2014. So, he has to make that transition from offensive coordinator to head coach. And I'm not so sure. Again, he's growing in the job. I think obviously 11-5 in his first year certainly made some big strides in that direction. But we've seen as Jet fans, you saw Todd Bowles. I mean, 10-5 going into the last week against the Buffalo Bills, and then the other shoe drops like a lot of Jet fans expect. So a lot of people are saying that this is not only the sophomore slump, but you find out what kind of coach not only you have in year one, but years 2, 3, and if they last beyond that. And I think Ben McAdoo is starting to show some of his worth as the head coach of the Giants.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you bring up the Jets, and look at that history. Over the years since Woody Johnson's been the owner. I mean, you're talking about. Okay, I'll leave Herman Edwards alone. I know he was a rookie coach, but I always thought Herman was a very good coach for this team, and they should never have let him go. But Eric Mangini, goes 10-6 and then falls backwards, and then eventually gets fired after the Favre season. Rex Ryan goes, 9-7 AFC Championship game first 2 years. And then Sanchez implodes, Tebow comes, more implosion by Sanchez, and then we all know what happened there. It just seems like it's a formula for failure in this town anyway, where you see these coaches come in who have really no head coaching experience. They do well right away, and then it just kind of flatlines after that. It's going to be really interesting to see how McAdoo handles this. It's going to be very interesting to see also how Jerry Reese handles this, because a lot of people are going after Jerry Reese as well, because of the lack of drafting of any kind of offensive line help during the last 2 years in the draft. He didn't address it in free agency at all. I thought he would address the offensive line in the draft this past year. Didn't do it. He hasn't brought in any kind of dynamic, and not even a dynamic running back like formerly like an Adrian Peterson, but going out in the draft and looking for that kind of linchpin running back like a Kareem Hunt or somebody like that. He hasn't done that, and that's something that a lot of people, I think, are going to start to get on Jerry Reese for if this continues, this poor play from the Giants.
And I want to get back to your point about first-year head coaches, specifically with the Jets franchise, but even with the Giants, enjoying early success and then kind of tapering off through the career. I mean, there's some kind of, you talk about the Jets, having Rex Ryan as their head coach before Todd Bowles. You go from a loudmouth blowhard who basically is just saying all sorts of nonsense in the media to Todd Bowles, who couldn't look more uncomfortable or has had 1 foot in and 1 foot out the door at the press conference room. He's a guy of few words, and I think when you have a head coach and you have such a dramatic shift from that type of loudmouth, boisterous guy to kind of a more reserved, calculated coach, you're going to have some players that are energized by that. It's going to help reinvigorate the fan base. You're going from one extreme to the other. So I think that's part of the reason why you saw, such a successful first year. There's obviously a new quarterback in town, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, a new coach, and that's been the track record for the Jets. And with McAdoo, I think he went from a coach that was, 70 years old, oldest coach in the league. A lot of people had pointed to his age. They said he wasn't as sharp as he used to be during his final year in 2015, when he basically inherited one of the worst defenses, if not the worst defense in the entire NFL. And, that team had absolutely no pass rush. Jerry Reese had his off-season agenda was to go and upgrade the defense, specifically the secondary, but most importantly, that defensive line. And he went ahead and did that by adding Vernon and adding Damon Harrison from the Jets. And, Jerry Reese is a GM that I really think that, he kind of is reactionary. He could have taken an offensive lineman easily. You had guys like Garrett Bowles. I mean, they had so many great, solid offensive line available in the 2017 draft. And he went ahead and basically basically didn't address the offensive line position. And so I think that you might even see next offseason if Jerry Reese is around, which, by all accounts he will be. You think the Giants probably will go ahead and say, we're going to take offensive linemen, but they probably did it just like with the defensive line a year ago. They probably did it a year too late. And I think McAdoo is still a coach that's growing into his job, and he's kind of he carries himself with that arrogance and that swagger that you like to see, and you probably need to in order to deal with the New York media. But like I said, he's not exactly Tom Coughlin. He still hasn't even had a playoff victory under his belt. He's never won the division. So even though despite the Giants went 11-5. They had a softer schedule last year. They were very fortunate in the turnover battle. They had some balls bounce their way, and they had a defense that, in the first year came together, had a lot of new pieces, and carried an offense that has been underwhelming since he's been the head coach, and that was his MO. He was supposed to be an offensive guru that was creative and drew up ways to produce points. And so far in a season and 2 games, I just haven't seen that from him.
No, I haven't seen that at all. And look, I when you have the kind of weapons they do, and you go from Brandon Marshall, you go to Odell. Of course, he just came back from the injury. Sterling Shepard, who's really been invisible this year, and a rookie like Ingram, who has had his issues so far getting acclimated to the NFL. He had that big drop near the end zone just last week. There's really no excuse to not find ways to get to these weapons to make these weapons work. I mean, that's what this whole thing was about. This was supposed to be one of the more dynamic offenses in the National Football League. It's not happening. And with Brandon Marshall, the big drop that he had there on third down that could have turned the game around for the Giants, ended up turning it around. They finished them off, for that matter, because the next play they punt, and you have the punt return for the Lions for the touchdown. I mean, it baffles my mind how poor this offense is playing, considering the talent they have around the quarterback. Now, is it all the offensive line? Sure, certainly they have to take their share of the blame, but I also have to look at the skill players, all the drops, all the miscommunications going on the field, and that's a problem as well. And it also falls on the head coach.
And it does, and a lot of people are criticizing Ben McAdoo because he was so quick to call out Eli Manning for not snapping the ball in time and letting the play clock expire and saying, that's on the quarterback. And basically, a lot of people thought he was throwing his quarterback under the bus, but he was reluctant to call out his left tackle in Ereck Flowers, who's basically been a turnstile. I'll liken him to Wayne Hunter during his days with the Jets. It's not gotten to that point just yet, but it's awfully close because Giant fans can't wait to get him out of the lineup and on the bench or into a developmental position because clearly he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing at the left tackle position. But I think part of the reason why Ben McAdoo didn't call out Ereck Flowers is because he's still a young player. His confidence is still a little shaky. Eli Manning's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP, and he's a guy that even said in the media that he's a big boy. He can take the criticism. Mm-hmm. He doesn't take anything too personally. He's a veteran. He's been around the league. So I think from that standpoint, I think McAdoo understands that he values Eli Manning. He understands how important he is to this team, and in a way, Eli has been criticized over the years, and it doesn't seem to faze him. He seems completely inflammable. Yeah. So I think a lot of that was played up in the New York media and played up in the papers and on sports talk radio. But the real issue here is I see schematically the Giants have a predictable offense. I don't see any creativity. I think they tried once the first play of the game on Monday night. They tried to reverse with Sterling Shepard, a creative play that you haven't seen them go into the bag of tricks for how many weeks. And sure enough, they get a 12-yard gain, and they never went back to it. They never tried any type of misdirection either in the running game, the passing game. I saw a couple times, which was good, Eli Manning, who's virtually a statue in the pocket. He's like a Tom Brady. He needs that protection. He can't get outside the pocket. But they rolled him out a couple times, and I thought when they did that, Brandon Marshall had a big drop when Eli was rolling out that should have been a first down. But the few times that they put him on the move, when that's really not his strength, at least it gave him and bought him some time in the pocket so he wasn't getting basically bashed in that pocket. Because I know Eli Manning, hasn't missed a game in his entire career, but there's only so much punishment this guy can take at 35 years old. And if they're going to try to get this offense going in the right direction, I mean, it's a hell of a week to do it against an Eagles pass rush that Alex Smith, I watched the game last week against Kansas City Chiefs, and that defensive front for the Eagles almost ate him alive. And so if the Giants, this is going to be a tall test for them, especially going into Philly for this game. So, I unfortunately think for Giants fans, I know they're not going to want to hear it, but I think things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, it's going to be tough in Philadelphia. It really is. And, before I make a point on the Eagles game coming up here on Sunday, I got to ask you this about the vitriol from fans, from the media about the Giants, because it was kind of, again, ironic that the Super Bowl team was there on Monday night. I wonder how many fans sat there who've always wanted Tom Coughlin fired. I mean, how many times we've seen from fans and Giant fans, I want Coughlin fired, I want Coughlin fired almost every single year. We're hoping and praying at halftime that he would grab the headset and take over in the second half. But it just amazes me. It amazes me the vitriol that you saw this week in the papers for an 0-2 start. It kind of reminded me of some of the stuff we saw after the butt fumble from the Jet standpoint a couple of years ago with everything splattered across the front page and back pages of all the New York papers.
And, it's a funny point you make because I think a lot of fans that now are calling Eli Manning out and saying they want to change a quarterback in 4 or 5 years, whenever it is that Eli finally hangs up his cleats, they are going to be absolutely begging him to come back to this franchise. Because I think a lot of Giant fans and, us having the Jet fan perspective can certainly attest to this. I think they take Eli Manning for granted. I mean, look, maybe he's not the quarterback he was 6, 7 years ago. Maybe he's lost a little, little velocity on that fastball, and he never was mobile in the pocket, but now maybe he's lost some athleticism. But the fact is, I mean, if you asked every Jet fan, would you rather have their current quarterback situation or Eli Manning? I think 10 out of 10 would take Eli Manning. So, unfortunately, it's kind of built into the DNA of a Giant fan. They're spoiled, and I don't think they truly appreciate the quarterback they have, and they probably won't until he's gone, and maybe they go through a couple of down years. I know Davis Webb is a guy that they drafted in the 5th round in this past draft that they think has some potential to be a franchise quarterback, but there are going to be some growing pains, and if Giants fans can't stay patient now and, are upset with the quarterback play in 2017, I can't imagine how they're going to just basically throw a fit watching a rookie quarterback throw probably a dozen interceptions in his first year. So, but before the Giants get to that point, obviously, again, you look up and down their schedule. I mean, there are no cupcakes at all in this 16-game schedule. I mean, the Giants are virtually going to have to go on some kind of winning streak to even get this thing back in the right direction. Because as far as I'm concerned, I look at this game on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles, a team in the Eagles that even under Tom Coughlin, you look over the past half a dozen, 10 games they've played against them, the Eagles have dominated the Giants, and not just beat them, but beat them convincingly. And, it looks like the Eagles have the Giants' number, especially, with Doug Peterson at the helm. So I'm expecting, unfortunately, another loss on Sunday. And staring 0-3 in the face, I understand they're going to go back to that 2017 that started 0-2. They let up 80 points in the first 2 games of the season, and everybody thought the year was over. This, to me, as you mentioned, had a much different feel to it because, again, if you can't protect the quarterback, Eli Manning's not the type of guy like a Ben Roethlisberger or a Russell Wilson that can get outside the pocket and make plays. If he does not have the protection up front and he's not comfortable, the Giants' offense is going absolutely nowhere, and they're going to have to rely on their defense and special teams to produce points. And we've seen with the Jets far too many times with how many, whether it's Geno or Mark Sanchez or Ryan Fitzpatrick, there's only so far defense and special teams can carry you. You need a quarterback and an offensive line to protect him so you can put points on the board as an offense.
Yeah. I mean, you look at that Giant-Eagle matchup over the years. The Giants have lost now 4 out of 5 at Lincoln Financial Field. 4 out of 5. I mean, that's pretty bad. And I look at this... I look at the talent here for this Eagle team. I mean, right away from the offseason, they really started to blow me away. I mean, you add Alshon Jeffrey, a good pass-catching receiver, a guy who could stretch the field a little bit. You add him in the mix with Zach Ertz, who is leading this team in receiving as really one of the more underrated tight ends in the NFL. You have Torrey Smith there, wide receiver. They pick up LeGarrette Blount, who certainly gives them a nice little change up there at running back between Blount and Sproles. So, I mean, it's an Eagle team that has so many different weapons that they can utilize, and it's going to be very tough for me to see unless the Giants are holding or have 30-plus minutes of time possession in this game. It's going to be very, very hard to keep this Eagles team under control, and it could be a situation where if the offense for the Giants does nothing, this Giant defense could get worn out by how fast and how talented this Eagle offense can be.
And the other wild card in this equation is Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, I saw that hit in the second week of the preseason in Cleveland, and I just had a feeling that the Giants are pretty tight-lipped with injuries. I had a feeling it could have been a high ankle sprain, and it was going to be a longer-term issue. And sure enough, here we are entering week 3 of the regular season, and he's saying he's been medically cleared. He still doesn't feel 100%. Last week against the Lions, he was on a snap count in week 2. They've lifted that now, so he's probably going to be, quote-unquote, a full participant, and he has been in practice. But for me, he's even telling the media he doesn't feel that explosiveness when he's in and out of his breaks, and that's his bread and butter. That, he's not the fastest receiver in the NFL. It's his ability to accelerate and decelerate out of breaks on his route that gives him separation against quarterbacks. And if he's not able to do that, he becomes pretty pedestrian, by his standards. Obviously, of course, you want him out there even as a decoy, but still, I think that Odell Beckham Jr., when I, interviewed him following the game against the Lions, you sensed some frustration, personally because of the issue that he's battling. Also, the coaching staff's decision, he said it was out of his hands to be on a snap count. I don't think he was happy about that. He seems to be an all-or-nothing player, and if he goes through another down week injury-wise aggravates that ankle or doesn't put up a great performance-wise game, you're going to start to have a guy that, has a reputation as a prima donna, could be a sour apple in the locker room, and, that could be spell trouble for the Giants down the road, along with Brandon Marshall. You mentioned they brought him in over, from the Jets, a guy that you can basically rely on for 3 to 4 touchdowns a year just down by the red zone for throwing the ball up for him for grabs, and he can't seem to get the engines going. And, a lot of rumblings now, is he on the decline? Is this it for him? Is this his final year? And he's denying that, but until he goes out and proves it, he's not going to silence a lot of those critics. So for me, again, this is going to be a stiff test against the Eagle team. And if things start to go south early, if the Giants commit an early turnover or, something happens on the defensive side of the ball where, they don't come up big and they have a down week, this team has that makeup where I think they could start to fracture. And the first guy I could see not being happy about his role and the state of the team is Odell Beckham Jr.
This is the kind of game the Giants wish they had someone like Ahmad Bradshaw or Brandon Jacobs. It really is, because they really need that kind of running back that could just take over the game and just control the clock, rip apart a couple of big runs and just take the pressure off of everybody else. I mean, that's the thing for me with the Giants in this game. If they can't run the football, can't control the clock, I just don't see how this could be a game where the Giants can stay competitive for the full 60 minutes. I think they can compete. I think they can still beat the Eagles. I'm not saying they won't, but it's going to be very, very difficult if they can't control the clock in this game.
Yeah, there's no question. And when you look at the makeup of this team, when you look at the offensive philosophy, I mean, nothing leads you to believe going back over the course of 16 games last year, the first 2 games of this year, they're not a ball control offense. I mean, I doubt their ability, if they have a big lead, to be able to hold it in the second half because they can't run the air out of the ball. They can't run the ball consistently and move the ball for first downs and milk the clock. I mean, it's basically an all or nothing offense. It's a quick hit to Odell Beckham Jr. And see what he does with the yards after the catch if he can get in for the end zone, and throwing up jump balls for Brandon Marshall in the end zone. I mean, there's just no continuity in the offense, no complementary football. And to me, as you mentioned, that falls on the coaching staff, but they do have a flawed roster, and that is really an indictment on Jerry Reese and this past draft that he didn't address the offensive line except for T.J. Fluker in free agency, and he's not even a regular part of the starting lineup. So, again, I want to see what changes Ben McAdoo's been hinting at. I'd imagine there's some mixed combinations in the offensive line. Maybe he does change up the play calling, whether he does it or quarterbacks coach and offense coordinator Mike Sullivan does it. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But, this is as much a must-win as a Week 3 game is for this Giants team because, again, I know a lot of people said it when the Giants were 0-2 in 2007 and the season was over, and obviously they came back. But for me, if this team goes 0-3 and they continue to have the struggles they have offensively, I can't see them not only, getting to the playoffs, I can't see them anywhere sniffing the playoffs, and I could see this turning into an ugly season and having Odell Beckham Jr. Be a malcontent for the rest of the year.
I could see that too. I really could. I mean, they're on the precipice of an ultimate disaster, and who would have thought that, considering the Jets have a soft part of their schedule here, they have the Dolphins, Jaguars, and Browns coming up. In 3 weeks, the Jets could have a better record than the Giants, which is incredible to think about. I mean, that's just the way things are going right now with these two teams. As far as prediction for this game, like I said, and like we both said here, I just find it very hard to fathom that unless the Eagles make a bunch of mistakes and Carson Wentz turns it over a bunch of times and the defense steps up in a big way, I think it's going to be a hard time for the Giants to win this game. I think they'll keep it close, but I do like Philadelphia to win this game, a very close game by a field goal. How about you?
Yeah, my prediction is 23-17 Eagles. I think that Eagles pass rush is just going to wreak havoc on Eli Manning. I see them forcing at least one turnover in the pocket. And frankly, this Giants offense that seemed eons ago since they scored 20 points, I still don't think they're going to get to the 20-point plateau. And this is the kind of game that, again, it's in Philadelphia, so I won't be in attendance for the post-game press conference. But boy, if they do lose this and they can't get to 20 points, you're going to start to see some frustration boil over. I know Ben McAdoo is the head coach. He's pretty even keel. He tries to say all the right things, but don't be surprised if a Brandon Marshall or an Odell Beckham Jr. Pop off and get upset at their lack of targets and express some frustration because, now, again, this isn't just one bad game or even 2 bad games. When you have 3 straight bad games to start the season, that's a pattern of no offensive productivity and a flawed offensive system. And so, again, I expect the Giants to, unfortunately for their fans, lose their third straight game and fail to score 20 points.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the ninth straight game in which they would fail to score 20 points if that indeed does happen. So, very, very tough situation for the Giants to be in. Rick Laughland, of course, joining us here. He works on fanfavorites.com and also on the Giants beat. Rick, again, a great segment here. I guess this means that we are in a situation where we are on the clock here watching both the Jets and the Giants competing for the number one pick in the draft next year.
Yeah. And for Jets fans, I mean, it was, you were prepared for this. It was a rebuild year, so they understood the writing on the wall. But for Giants fans, I mean, you're coming off 11-5 NFC wildcard appearance. This is maybe a couple more years with Eli Manning at quarterback. I mean, they're trying to get him one final Super Bowl. So, for them to be 0-2 at this point, staring a possible 0-3 start to the season in the face, I mean, that has to be driving Giant fans nuts. But we know all too well, Jet fans, when the Jets are suffering, the Giants fans don't exactly take it easy on you. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, I think things get a heck of a lot worse before they get better for the Giants.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you 100% there, Rick. Rick, I want to thank you so much, man, for coming on, talking some Giant football here today on the Open Mic program. All right, folks, that was Rick Laughland. He is the managing editor of Mets Amazing Clubhouse. He is also a writer for the Giants Beat as well as fanfavorites.com. So great to have him on to talk about the Giants. Now, without any further ado, we have some work to do here. We got our picks for week number 3. Last week I was 5-2 in the picks, and we'll see how we do this week. A lot of interesting games this week. A lot of interconference matchups we have this week. You got Bengals, you got Packers, you got Bears, you got the Bears going up against the Steelers. You got a big matchup, probably the game of the week this week. Falcons and Lions this week. Big game out of the NFC. A lot of intriguing matchups that we're going to talk about here in our week 3 picks here in the Open Mic program. First of all, let's just pick up where we left off with the Giants and the Eagles matchup. We talked about it ad nauseum here for the last half hour. This is going to be tough for the Giants. I mean, they have all these issues up front in the offensive line. Arguably, one of the worst offensive lines in the National Football League. They don't run the football well at all. There's a lot of talk that head coach Ben McAdoo is going to allow his offensive coordinator to call the plays in this game. We'll see if that does happen. And even if he did allow that to happen, I don't know if it's going to be enough in this kind of football game because the Giants just don't have the pieces up front and in the running game to make the difference. Like I said to Rick, if they had like a Brandon Jacobs type of player to make that difference in the running game, I would love to take the Giants this week. I would love to take the Giants this week, but I'm not going to do it. The Eagles have a lot of talent. They have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, they got a lot of weapons there for Carson Wentz. That doesn't mean that the Eagles are infallible. I mean, we saw the Eagles lose last week to the Kansas City Chiefs in a very competitive game. So the Eagles can be picked off. Would I be shocked if the Eagles lost this game to the Giants? I would not. But considering all the issues going on with the Giants right now, they're trying to figure things out. The Eagles right now playing pretty decent football at home. This will be their home opener. They don't want to disappoint their fans at the link. And also the fact that the Giants have now lost 4 of their last 5 in that building over the last 5 seasons. It's going to be a really, really tough matchup for the Giants. So I will take the Eagles in a very close game. I'll take Philadelphia 22-16. Game number 2, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Chicago Bears. Nothing says fall like a matchup between the Steelers and the Bears. Okay, I know they only meet once every 4 years. I get it. But you talk about two teams that are all football, black and blue. You think of games in the cold, games in bad weather, and it's going to be over 90 degrees. Yes, it's going to be over 90 degrees probably in Chicago, like it is going to be in most of the country this weekend. So much for that. But it is fall, and it is, of course, the Steelers and the Bears. Last time that these two teams met was 2013. The Bears won that game, 40-23. Maybe the more famous game these two teams played was in 1995, and the Steelers won that game in overtime, 37-34. Long time. That was the days of Eric Kramer for the Bears and Neil O'Donnell for the Steelers. That's how long ago that game was. But anyway, as far as this game is concerned, it really is a mismatch. I mean, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a veteran team, a team that's going to be expected to go deep into the playoffs this year, against the Bears team that's really rebuilding. Going with Mike Glennon at quarterback, really a tough spot for the Chicago Bears to go up against this Pittsburgh defense. Pittsburgh's defense ranked 5th in the NFL right now. yielding 237 yards per game, only 163 yards per game through the air. This will not be fun for the Chicago Bears and for Mike Glennon at all. They lost their last two games. They were annihilated, of course, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think they're going to get annihilated here against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're going to see a lot of Le'Veon Bell. You're going to see Ben Roethlisberger have a big game, and he hasn't had a big game yet. He'll have a big game here against this Bears defense, and expect Antonio Brown to get a couple of touchdowns. I like the Steelers in this game to win, going away 34-10. Now let's keep the North feel going here as we move on over to Cincinnati, to Green Bay, rather. Have the Green Bay Packers hosting the Cincinnati Bengals in a late game on Sunday afternoon on CBS. And you know what? You can feel the grill starting to burn underneath Marvin Lewis right now. He is in big trouble. Fired his offensive coordinator last week after that debacle they had against the Texans on Thursday night. And now all the attention is on him. All the attention is on Andy Dalton right now. I was listening to one of the shows earlier this week. A lot of grumbling right now in that locker room about Andy Dalton's status as the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals. So a lot of eyes will be on Cincinnati this week. And this is not the situation they want to be in, having to go into Green Bay against the Packer team that's annoyed after having come off of what was a blowout loss to the Atlanta Falcons last Sunday night. I expect a big performance here from the Packers. Expect a big day out of Aaron Rodgers here against this Bengal defense, which has been good, has been decent, but hasn't been good enough. I think they'll be overmatched this week against Green Bay. And again, the Bengals, can they actually score a touchdown? That's going to be the big question this time. I think they actually do score a touchdown this time. Well, it's not going to be enough. I like the Packers winning easily, 38-20 over the bumbling Bengals. All right, the next game we're going to hit up here is the Los Angeles Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. This game, of course, being played out in L.A. And, you know, first thing, before we talk about this matchup, the move for the Chargers to go out to L.A. so far has been a complete disaster. There's been some rumors. I don't know if there's any gravitas to this, but there's been rumors that perhaps the NFL would like to see the Chargers move back to San Diego. I don't know if that's going to happen. Not likely. But let's be honest. It's been a total failure for the Chargers out there in Los Angeles. Nobody's going to the games. It's a 27,000 seat stadium. It's a soccer stadium they're playing in. They will be playing in there for 2 more seasons, which is even more outrageous for this team. So, considering the venue this team is playing in, it has not been ideal times here for the Chargers. And now they get the red-hot Kansas City Chiefs in here, and it's not exactly the kind of team they want to face right now. The Chiefs are clicking on all cylinders right now. And in a lot of minds of a lot of people, including myself, might be the best team, certainly out of the AFC right now. Now, I know that things could change. You got the Patriots, of course, down the road. You would expect them to turn things around. Pittsburgh right there, Oakland as well. But as of right now, in the AFC, you have to like the Kansas City Chiefs as one of the top teams, if not the top team, out of the conference. And they've done that out of many different ways. I mean, the biggest thing is, of course, the ground game here for Kansas City. You have Kareem Hunt, who is right now leading the team with 229 yards rushing, 7.6 yards a carry. Before the Thursday night game between San Francisco and the LA Rams, Kareem Hunt was leading the league in rushing. And more than likely, after Sunday, he's going to continue to lead the league in rushing. He's been fantastic. Alex Smith hasn't turned it over. 5 touchdowns, no picks. Tyreek Hill has been amazing. Travis Kelce has been solid. So everything has been clicking just right here for the Kansas City Chiefs. Not to mention their defense certainly getting after the quarterback already with 9 team sacks and an interception and 10 passes defensed. So they have done the job all the way around here for the Chiefs, and I expect that to continue here against the Chargers. The Chargers have been somewhat snake-bit over the first 2 weeks. They could have easily won last week, except for that bizarre finale against Miami where they missed a field goal. The week before that, they missed a field goal to tie a game against the Denver Broncos. So at the very least, the Chargers could be 1-1, if not 2-0 right now, had the ball bounce their way a couple of times. Yes, Philip Rivers has played well, but they're not running the football all that well. Their defense has been so far this season. This will be a tough task for the Chargers. Can they win? Yes, it's a divisional game. These two teams don't like each other. There's a long history here. But I really like the Kansas City Chiefs in this game. I love the way they've been playing football lately. So my pick for this football game, I'm taking the Kansas City Chiefs to win 31-16 over the Los Angeles Chargers. All right, now for the big games of the week. And there's three really big games this week in the NFL. You got Detroit against Atlanta, you got Washington against Oakland, and you got Dallas against Arizona. I'm going to start with the Detroit-Atlanta game, and I think this could easily be the game of the week because you got two teams, both undefeated at 2-0. The Detroit Lions coming off what was a really impressive effort against the Giants. I know Matthew Stafford didn't throw for a lot of yards, only threw for $122 against the Giants. But the way he managed that game against that defense, and the Giant defense, in the minds of a lot of people, considered one of the best defenses in the league. And he managed the game extremely well against that football team. Threw for a couple of touchdowns, a lot of checkdowns. He has more control of the play calls at the line of scrimmage than he has had in years past. And why not? It's really showing and it's really producing positive results for this Detroit team. Overall, he's completed 71% of his passes, 6 touchdowns, just 1 pick. They're able to run the football. Something that's always been a problem for the Lions over the years has been their inability to run the football. So far this year, they've done a nice job with that. Amir Abdullah has done a solid job so far to start. We've seen Matthew Stafford, even in the Monday night game, take some plays on his own and run the football himself to create some yards. So the Lions, coming off that impressive effort against the Giants, coming into a tough game here against the Falcons. And the Falcons, for my money, might be the best team in the NFL right now. They look like a team poised to go back to the Super Bowl and try to avenge what happened to them last year. And I really got that feeling after watching them against Green Bay, because I know that final score was 34-23. That game did not feel like 34-23. That game at the end of the third quarter was 34-10. It was over. It was a blowout. Aaron Rodgers didn't have much of anything in that game against that Atlanta defense. They were controlling the line of scrimmage. They were putting tons of pressure against Aaron Rodgers in that game defensively. Got 3 sacks in him, knocked him around. And then on the other side of the football, you have Atlanta just doing their thing. I mean, Matt Ryan had a solid game. Devontae Freeman did his thing for 84 yards, a couple of scores. Really nothing surprising from the Atlanta standpoint. And this looks like a team that after last week will be very difficult to beat. And if Atlanta gets to 3-0, you're looking at a situation where they could start to roll in this conference, and they could start to run and high. I know they play in a pretty good division right now where you have Tampa Bay, a team that a lot of people like. Carolina, they play a very weak Saints team. They should get to 3-0. So I understand, yes, technically Atlanta, even if they get to 3-0, they aren't really exactly running away with things. But you compare the Falcons to the other teams in that division, they're the best team in that division, and they're probably the best team in the conference. I love this game. I think it's going to be a phenomenal matchup between these two teams. You got a Lions defense that certainly has been playing much better going up against that Atlanta offense, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough, because this is a different kind of animal when you have facing the Atlanta Falcons. I know the Giants were talented. Giants have no offensive line. Atlanta does. And there's going to be a difference here in this game. So I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a fun game to watch. But I do think Atlanta is going to pull it out on the road for the second time in 3 weeks here, and they're going to get to 3-0. They will win this game over Detroit, a good game, and they'll win it 27-24. But I will say this, if Detroit were to win and to get to 3-0, that's going to really change the narrative about the Detroit Lions, because the Detroit Lions have always been that lovable loser. In recent years, they have been that team that hasn't gotten a lot of credit. They've been pretty good, but no one really has paid a lot of attention to them. And Jim Caldwell, trying to get that team to the playoffs for the 3rd time in his 4 years as coach, he deserves some kudos. But for this game, at least for this week, I like the Atlanta Falcons over the Detroit Lions. Again, final score of 27-24. What in the name of Super Bowl 18 do we have here? Yes, on a Sunday night, we got the Raiders and the Redskins. Okay, maybe it's not as important or as big a stage as their more famous meeting in Super Bowl 18 when Marcus Allen was running all over the Redskins in the Raiders win. But you have this game on a Sunday night. Should be a lot of fun. You have the Raiders coming in at 2-0, the Redskins at 1-1. This will be a tricky game for the Raiders. They come in here as a 3-point favorite. They are 2-0. They've already won a game on the road. Second time in 3 weeks they have to go all the way to the East Coast to play a game. Now on a Sunday night against the Redskins team that does have some firepower. I know the Redskins are a little beaten up coming into this game. Raiders come in much more healthy than the Redskins do. But if you are the Raiders, you have to be careful because, again, the Redskins are a team with some talent. I mean, they have a quarterback there in Kirk Cousins who can make things happen with his arm. They do have some guys there who can make some plays at the wide receiver position, of course, namely Jordan Reed, who is banged up coming into this game, but he can make some plays down the middle of the field. And they did run the football well last week with a three-headed monster of Rob Kelly, Chris Thompson, and Samaje Perine. But the thing that worries me with the Redskins is they really haven't been that impressive. I mean, they really haven't. I mean, they had a tough time against the Rams. I know the Rams are looking like a pretty good team right now, especially after that shootout last night where they beat the 49ers 41-39. But the Redskins had a 13-0 lead against the Rams last week and still struggled to put that game away. So Washington hasn't been that great. They've already lost the game at home. But this is one of those games, like I said, that could be very, very tricky. I mean, it is a game that is kind of set up for the upset in a lot of ways here for the Raiders. The Raiders have a divisional game next week coming up against the Denver Broncos. Could they be looking ahead to that? This is the kind of game that would be considered, by all accounts, a trap game. So this will be a tough one for the Raiders, I think. But what separates the Raiders here from the Redskins is the fact that they have a very, very talented offense. Derek Carr has been unbelievable, completing 75% of his passes. Like Alex Smith, hasn't thrown a turnover yet, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Marshawn Lynch looks like a guy who's just rejuvenated. I mean, the guy is in love with football again. He's had a tremendous start to his season so far this year. You got the talented duo there, Crabtree and Cooper. And not to mention, they're going up against the defense of the Redskins that right now is ranked 27th in the league. So I'll go with the Raiders, although I will put the caveat, as I said earlier, that this could be considered a trap game in some ways. I'll take the Raiders in a close one, 27-24 on Sunday Night Football. Now, finally, before we close it out, we got the Monday night game between the Cowboys and the Arizona Cardinals. Boy, you talk about two teams that are desperate for a win. I mean, you have the Cardinals right now at 1-1. You have the Cowboys at 1-1. But both of these teams can't be feeling good about themselves going into this game. The Cowboys got blown out last week against the Denver Broncos. Their offense still has not clicked. They haven't scored 20 points in a game yet through 2 games. Dak Prescott has not looked like the quarterback we saw a year ago. There are a lot of people wondering what kind of quarterback is he now. You know, there was a lot of hype about Prescott coming into this year, coming off of his efforts from last year. I even hear on the radio this afternoon some people are wondering, is he now a game manager? I don't know. I'm not ready to put labels on quarterbacks at this point so early in their career. That's the one thing we make a mistake of in the NFL is we like to put labels on players before we really truly know what kind of player they're going to be long term. So this is a big game for Prescott. It's a big game for Ezekiel Elliott. A lot of people made a big deal about his effort or lack thereof against the Broncos at the end of that game last week. So this is an opportunity, I think, for the Cowboys to have a bit of an answer here for everybody, to kind of shut people up a little bit, to go on the road into a hostile environment on a Monday night in Arizona against a team that they've had a tough time against in the last number of times they played one another. Arizona's won 4 in a row against the Cowboys, so this is a chance to beat a rival in a lot of ways in the Cardinals and also get back on the right track. So I'm kind of liking the Cowboys in this spot. A lot of people are going to like Arizona because they're home, because they have the win under their belt last week. But the thing that stops me with the Cardinals is this. They could have lost that game against the Colts. Carson Palmer played terribly in that game against the Indianapolis Colts. Threw an interception. I know he threw for over 300 yards, but everyone throws for over 300 yards nowadays in these games. Chris Johnson had really no impact. They missed David Johnson big time right now for this Cardinals offense. They're still trying to figure that out. And they really had a tough time really establishing anything offensively in that game for Arizona. So I have concerns about the Cardinals going into this game. If you had asked me in the summer, I probably would have taken the Cardinals in this game just based on the fact that this team had the talent going into the season, had a healthy group of players here, and has a very good head coach, obviously, in Bruce Arians. They still do. But I just worry about the Cardinals right now at this point in the year. I think it's a great spot for Dallas right now to make an impression. If they don't, there's going to be a lot of hell to pay for the Dallas Cowboys. People are going to go crazy. You think people went crazy last week on the Giants? They're going to go crazier, especially in Dallas, if the Cowboys end up losing to the Cardinals. So I like the Cowboys in this game. I'm going to say another close game. I will say the Cowboys win a low-scoring game by a field goal, 23-20. Over the Arizona Cardinals on Monday night, and a lot of people are going to begin to wonder what's going on with the Cardinals. So those are my picks here for week number 3 here in the National Football League. Folks, it's been a pleasure. I want to really thank Rick Laughland as well as coming on here and talking with us about the New York Giants game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Remember to follow us on the social media, at OpenMicNJ on Twitter, Facebook.com/OpenMicProgram, and of course, subscribe right here on YouTube to the Sports Talk Nation. Folks, take care. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Sports Talk Nation.